Hello, everybody.
I know you do that now. Hey,
It's your fault. You started it.
I'm Sarah Black.
I'm Theo Black, and This is the first week in December, and we are doing 2020 catch up on movies that were released on streaming that we didn't see because it's kind of weird. I'm not as good at following movies when they're not in theaters, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
things are different. So yeah, we've been
Yeah,
catching up. We did catch a few. Like
yeah.
we watched White
What
Day.
Day, which is still one of my favorite movies of the year.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of. I mean, it depends on what released this year. There's not a ton of competition, but it is a genuinely good movie.
Yes,
Um,
and hey, this month we're gonna find out a little bit, and maybe we'll. I kind
yeah,
of feel like I have two thoughts. One, we're already doing this. Is actually the second week in December for people who are listening, and we're gonna start. It's
right,
probably next month for January. I'm gonna have us start doing it on the actual.
right. Now I
We're gonna be
agree.
a, we'll be ahead a week, but everybody else will be in the month.
Yeah.
And the other thought is I kind of want to make sure we're watching new movies still. Not that we always need to talk about them, but I miss my new movies, you know?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
watched that tragic French rom-com that's all about how you need to connect with people in order to grow and find love. You didn't watch it. I forget what it's called. I could find it if you want, but it just was like so ill-timed. It's like, yeah, you're right. You really need to get away from your computer and connect to people.
You certainly
Mm,
do.
yeah, yes, you really do.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. Oh, we've been watching so many movies, and of course, in all these movies, occasionally while we're watching it, we'll be like, I remember the days when we could all sit in a restaurant together, and
Yep.
I know, I'm pretty sure some places they're probably doing that, even against. I mean, we're in California, and cases are like skyrocketing here, and in the
Yeah.
U.S. as a whole of COVID. So it's like I don't know. Anyways,
Uh, yeah. Okay, so the first movie we watched was your pick. But you have no idea what happened. So do you want me to summarize this?
yes, probably you should. I want to do it, but it's just going to come out as gibberish. So you do it.
Okay, so we watched The Wolf House, La Casa Lobo, which is from Chile, I believe.
It's Chile, but it's like it's from Chile, but there's also a lot of German stuff going on.
Right. So apparently, at one point in time there was like a German community in Chile. I know that around World War II time or right after World War II time, probably. My history on this is very fuzzy, but there are a lot of uh, some Germans fled to South America. Great people. And nothing wrong with the Germans. The ones that were fleeing to South America were often Nazis. So that's what I'm saying.
Yes, there was two major
Germans are
groups.
lovely, just like every.
Yes, no, I that was an amusing foot and mouth moment. There were two large groups who came. It was the Nazis and it was people who were afraid of more nuclear
Right.
war. And for some reason, South America was on a lot of people's list. This is a thing in Japanese cinema that I've discovered as well. Don't understand it. Anyways, keep going.
Also, Jewish people
That
emigrated as
That's
well.
true too.
So this is a kind of a fake propaganda film about the German colonies' benevolence, but it's also basically about a young woman growing up in this enclosed community and being under the control of a father figure and her attempts to kind of, I don't know, have a family and a community and freedom and so on. And that's it. It's okay. So it's animated.
Oh, spoilers were. I mean,
We're
this
going to
is kind.
spoil everything. This is not a traditionally narrative film. And so you're not knowing what happened is fine. Honestly, it's
Yeah.
fine. But there are these, all in German, this kind of warm male voice that will come in and talk to the main character, who is Maria, about like things. And,
Stuff.
that's obviously and it's based on something real that I don't know anything about. So I can't, I just very briefly read and it sounds not great. I mean, it sounds like a cult. A lot of it made me think of a cult. And so Maria is kind of our main character we're following, and she seems to adopt these pigs that she then anthropomorphizes, and the film itself anthropomorphizes. It's all animated. Um,
And we should say specifically it's mixed media animation,
Mm-hmm.
and it's mixed media between there's a set. I mean, there's a few. There's like a beginning and ending that aren't mixed media. There's some like footage, like some fake
Mm-hmm.
footage, I guess. But it's a house that has furniture in it, and so there's that, except that it's being like removed and broken apart, and like there's painting. Is the walls are being painted, and like sometimes the walls are being painted to look like a house, and sometimes there's people, and then there's
Right.
paper,
This is sorry, keep going.
and there's also paper mache, and those are the two main things: is the paintings on the walls and the floors, I guess, but mostly the walls, and the paper mache. At least I think is paper mache that's
Yeah.
being, or some sort of papers.
Looks like paper tape sometimes. It's hard to
Yeah,
know.
it's hard to know exactly, but it's mixed media. Um, when we say
Completely, which is
animation,
really neat. It's sometimes is it's I don't know where animation begins and ends, but a lot of it is actually time lapse to me
right?
because you're actually seeing the figures be created. You're actually seeing the paint go on the wall. You're not seeing anybody do it. No people appear in the movie except those beginning and end pieces that are kind of different.
Yeah,
But you see the figures being built up, you see the paint, the tape being put on, and that's not and then there is animation where the figures move or the some of my favorite parts were when you had this 3D figure that, yeah, it's paper mache or some kind of 3D object, but then the walls of the house were animated, but they were animated to look like hallways. It was looking like she was walking. They
yeah.
were so the you knew that she was in this room, but that they had painted the walls so it no longer looked like that room. It looked like she was going down a dark hallway. That
Like
stuff I thought looked really neat.
that stuff was really cool. Like, is it forced perspective? Is that what it is? I don't know what it's called. It's probably not
Yeah,
forced. It's something like
yeah, I
that.
don't think that's forced perspective. I don't know what that is. I don't know that there's
Yeah.
a name for it.
This is the kind of thing where like there isn't even a Wikipedia page for this film, and I could probably read some articles to figure this out, but I don't want to like taint my review of the film. Like I like to do these before I read a bunch of stuff up on them.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, not always. And so it's like probably somebody knows what's going on here, but it's also just fascinating to see like there's like a figure, and like it's built up and it's moving and doing stuff, and then it's like being taken apart, so you see like the foam and like whatever is it was inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they do a lot of that, and you see like the pigs move their heads, and you see like cuts and creases form, and then they get covered up when they get to a new stationary point. So
You see
it's
drips of paint that then get
yeah,
painted over.
yeah, totally. And it's it feels intentional. I mean, it's a bit hard to know. This could be like someone's passion project. I have no clue like whether there was money or not put towards this. Certainly there was a lot of time and effort put into it,
Yes.
but it's hard to know like how, and it's hard to know for sure, but it felt intentional because the story, as much as I mean, it is a story, but it's non-narrative or pretty confusing. Like it seems to be I mean, essentially it's like, to me, the way I read it was like this person is escaping a cult or trying to like figure their life out in a cult, right? And I wasn't ever too sure like did she escape the cult,
Mm-hmm.
like, and this is her like trying to build a life outside of the cult? Is she still in the cult but she's like really secluded from it? It's not super clear to me. Or I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I guess the idea is that she escapes it because that seems to be what the beginning is, and getting away from the wolf. But because of that, it kind of makes sense that you're like seeing these things be built up and broken down, because that's kind of like maybe what's going on for somebody who's in a cult or trying to escape a
Mm-hmm.
cult or reprogramming. I don't know. We, as much as we do listen to true crime things, it's kind of hard to know exactly what's going on.
Right.
But the fact that you see this art being built up and built down, broken down, and all the painting on the walls and the figures moving or not moving, and like it's just fascinating. Like this is one of those ones where it's like, I'm not sure it's exactly a great movie, but whether or not it is, in terms of my own feelings or my own qualitative judgment of it, it is a very unique thing. you
Well,
know
that's where I kind of what I wanted to talk about first. Like you and I, it came up a lot with Loving Vincent, and I don't want to rehash that, but um, there was a lot of press around that. I have the name right. That's the one that was oil paintings
yeah,
animated to look,
Loving Vincent.
um, and a lot of the rhetoric around that was how much work it was, which
Yeah.
I always find a little unfair because I know people who work in the film industry and it's always really hard work. People work really hard on movies that aren't very good. And that's just, and
You,
Loving Vincent was a real mixed bag. But honestly, this is a lot of work and it's, I think, visually more amazing than like Loving Vincent. I think it's really stunning, all the what they did and how it had to be planned. And yeah, there's drips and stuff, but it feels like they want you to see it. But what I was really also thinking about was, I think I've even talked, we talk about like the buckets that different movies go into. And like there's a
right.
big bucket that's like the movie bucket, right?
Yeah.
But like, you know, you could talk about this in the same terms as you do an Avengers movie. I'm not going to stop you if that helps you grow as a human being. Go ahead and do it. But to me, like, you could almost like cluster the bucket. So like Avengers and Roma, like again, not movies I would really necessarily compare to each other for any reason, but they kind of fit in buckets kind of near each other. They're narrative, they follow
Right.
traditional structure,
Yeah.
they, so on.
Right.
This bucket is like over there. This is a different this film makes me think of stuff you see in a museum.
Yeah.
Recently I was back in February, I was in Chicago right before everything really closed down, and we saw an exhibit that had a lot of audio visual stuff to it.
Yeah.
And there was this thing where this woman would sneeze food and her nose was growing longer, and then you could look down this hole and there were women making oysters, making pearls and oysters. And it was very like it was art, like
Yeah.
take it or leave it, hate it or not. Like it wasn't, it was never gonna, I mean, it could play in a theater, but it's not what you're gonna see in a theater.
Right.
This definitely felt like something you would see in a museum. And honestly, I've seen Quay brothers in a museum. Like
Yeah.
there's stuff that overlaps. I mean, we've seen they had a Kubrick exhibit.
Yes.
So obviously, like, there's overlap, but to me, this, you don't evaluate this the way you do a movie. It's not meant to be.
Yeah.
I was not always entertained by it. In fact, there were a lot of times where I found myself thinking about Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, which I looked up to make sure I got the name right, which is a movie about a woman escaping a cult that's in the movie bucket, in the traditional movie bucket with Roma, probably.
Got it.
And I think that was just because a lot of the time-lapse stuff, it's just hard to focus. It's hard to stay with something that's so non-narrative.
It is.
But it's the same. Oh, and the other thing was that we haven't brought up is that the camera is constantly moving.
Yes.
There are ways of steadying camera when doing like stop motion and so on. I don't know how it works. They didn't do it here. And part of me likes how rough it looks, but also it was making me kind of nauseous at times. And some of my more favorite sections are the sections where the camera did stay more still.
Yeah.
So when a lot of that was happening and a lot of the time-lapse stuff was happening, I would find myself kind of longing for like just straightforward narrative.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what this movie was meant to be. I think it's really impressive. I think.
Yeah, no, I went into this movie blind, and I specifically told you to go into it blind because I saw an image from it, and I'm like, this looks like the Quay brothers.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just go into it without knowing what was up.
Mhm.
And I think I'm glad I did that because it really is. So Loving Vincent, I also was thinking a lot about Loving Vincent, and they're not. This is comparison for the sake of sort of an understanding. They're different movies.
No, you can compare things. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I want to be clear because it's really difficult because the thing with Loving Vincent is it was impressive. I mean, any movie can be impressive, even Marvel movies. I know that they're made more or less by a factory at this point, but they're still impressive and there's still a lot of hard work, right?
Right.
Loving Vincent, there's a lot of hard work. The thing was, it doesn't look different than any traditional animated film. Like it is still, like it looks different in the sense that it's a painting, but it's not different in the same sense that the form is still roughly the same.
Right.
Whether it's 2D or 3D, it is still, in terms of like you know, it's two-dimensional, whether it's made with 3D objects or not. You know,
Hmm.
you can make a 3D film look like this, you can make a 2D film look like this. Classical animation and Loving Vincent look the same in terms of form.
Right.
And I ultimately got wigged out by the paint strokes moving on the people's faces, because most of the
Right.
time the background wouldn't move, but their faces would. And so
Right.
that,
Loving Vincent had almost the opposite problem, where every time the camera was still, which was for long periods of time, it was
yeah,
kind of boring.
yeah.
And then when it moved, it was really exciting.
Exactly. And I was going to basically say that. And the problem with it being still was that it made me uncomfortable. It didn't make me nauseous.
Yeah.
I also got nauseous by the Wolf House, like you did. It took
Yeah.
me a little longer, I think, because you mentioned it. And then, like 15 or 10 minutes later, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm getting nauseous now, too.
Yeah.
The problem is there was a number of times where the camera was in a still position. We were just looking at people sitting at a table or something,
Hmm.
and it was still shifting slightly.
Yeah.
And
No.
eventually that messes with your equilibrium.
Yeah.
And I liked how rough it looked, but I don't need it to look rough in those still moments.
Yeah.
So I wonder what the viewing experience would be like if those still moments the camera wasn't shifting as much.
Yeah.
And now going back to, like, it's also the other thing. So what's for the Wolf House, it is mixed media, like I said, and it doesn't look like anything else I've seen before, except maybe the Quay brothers. I know there's
Svankmajer. It
I was
looks
going to
like
say
Svankmajer.
Svankmajer.
I meant to ask you to watch Jabberwocky by Svankmajer before this, because it's all in a room, but he
Yeah.
doesn't move. My recollection is I think he does close-ups and stuff like that, but he doesn't actually move the camera. But I could be wrong. I should have rewatched it before doing this. I also know that Svankmajer's done live action that I
Yeah.
think he mixes with animation, which I have never watched. So
Right.
some
And
of
so,
his
like,
full length stuff.
there's a much smaller bucket, and this bucket is
Right.
way over there. And even like Quay Brothers is like kind of a different bucket than the Wolf House is. You know, Quay
Yes.
Brothers are pretty much only short films. I know they've done a
Yes.
feature, but so, like, there's that kind of stuff. I mean, this film is pretty short. It's what, 72 minutes or something? It's
Yeah.
really short, but it's still a full film. And like,
Yeah.
and even Carl Zeman, you know, his stuff, like, it's mixed media between real and what's, you know, fake, but it looks more like a traditional movie than this, or like
Yeah.
uh,
I
a
can't remember having seen an animation like this that's, I want to call it postmodern, because it shows you how it's being made as it's being made.
yeah. And I mean, it is just so fascinating. It is so fascinating to me.
Hmm.
And it's hard. We talk about how it's hard to critique films sometimes. Is your cat
Hmm.
doing something?
A little bit, but don't worry, keep going.
Okay. It is hard to talk about a movie and critique a movie like this, because you just don't, like, you don't see this or Bird Boy, or there's just like animated movies in particular, but even like a small film like, oh, I don't know, what was something we've seen that's like, they're hard to critique, because
Yeah.
this doesn't feel, I mean, even if they put money behind
Well, even
this.
A Field in England falls into that, where it's
Yeah.
like, I don't want to see 30 A Field in England. I don't have a
No.
lot of A Field of Englands to compare it to. It's just it's just
Yeah. The only thing I
something
can
interesting.
there's nothing mainstream that I can compare. I mean, I guess the closest I can compare this to is regular stop motion, like a Isle of Dogs or something,
Yeah.
which you can sort of compare it to that, but it is still so different that it's
Yeah.
like that had stuff in it where I could be like, oh, well, that's really neat and whatever, and I can kind of look at it this and that at the same time. But it's hard to really, and at the same time, I got bored during this, but I didn't get bored at the animation so much as, like, the animation was always neat. I just wasn't always interested in what the animation was doing, because your cat.
It's very hard.
I wasn't always interested in what the animation was
Right.
doing, because it's like it's
But
kind of, we're
it's
just,
okay to get bored sometimes too.
yeah,
Like,
that's true.
I like ballet, and I've taken people to ballet, and I've been like, if you get bored, that's fine. Like, it's
Yeah.
fine. There's nothing, like,
Yeah.
people don't like being bored, and I don't know, I kind of like being bored sometimes. It really depends. But
It
if you're
depends.
this kind of thing where you're watching art can get boring sometimes, and I
Yeah.
don't find, I don't want you to bore me with your action film, but if you're gonna bore me with your art, I'll just keep watching until something catches my
Yeah.
eye again.
And if because we've talked so much about the animation already and how interesting and beautiful and
It's
it
not
is.
beautiful though. It's
Well,
grotesque and weird and stuff.
I mean beautiful in the sense of like it is grotesque. Like I think the Quay brothers stuff is beautiful, but it's
Right.
beautiful in the sense of like it's
I just
not.
want people
It's
who are listening to be like, this isn't like
this
a
is
some
grotesque beauty.
early Disney animation is beautiful. This is grotesque,
This is
but it's
grotesque or
beautifully
warped.
grotesque.
It's
Yes.
beautifully warped. It's beautifully grotesque. It's
Yeah.
beautifully horrifying.
Yeah.
Um, the story is where, and looking at the story, it opens with like, here is this film about the what is the collective, the something, I don't remember.
Colony. It's a
The
colony.
colony, yeah. And this woman is running away, and we end up in a house, and it just stuff starts happening, and she's talking, and she's like trying to figure out what's going, how to live her life, I guess, and like try to and she's anthropomorphizing these pigs, but are they really pigs or are they people? Is she trying to get help these people that she's, that might be her children that she had with the cult leader, because that's where my brain goes, be real people and not pigs who just are idiots and follow and eat mush and whatever. Like, and so all we're going to talk about this later with Black Bear probably too, but like the ideas are really interesting, and like there is a story there, and I'm enjoying what's happening in the Wolf House. But at a certain point, I'm like, but what is this all going? This isn't really
Well,
going
that's
to
where
anything. It
I
doesn't
didn't.
need.
Yeah.
I don't need it to be structured. I watch enough of these films where I don't need it to be structured, but I'm getting just lost enough where I'm like, I don't need structure, but I also,
See, and that's where I was like, this is a museum piece, and I don't care. Like, it's
yeah,
getting the sense of creepiness and oppression
yeah, it
and
gets all that really.
disorientation and all that really well. I don't care what the story is. Like,
It's weirdly I it's very heady, but it doesn't. This is the kind of film where it's really heady, and I want to be emotional about some of the stuff that's happening, but I'm never really being
yeah,
emotional,
I get that.
and it's not.
But I feel like I was reacting in a visceral way. And I think I also want to say, I mean, plot. I don't care what the plot is. The story is there. The story is a creepy story about a
Yeah,
girl in a cult or a commune or a colony or
yeah.
whatever.
It's the plot that is really
But
difficult.
I
It's more
still
than
got
the
a very
story.
visceral sense of creepiness and oppression and a very deep sense of like bad. Like things were bad. Like you don't, you watch movies where you're like, oh, I'd like to be there. Like, even sometimes
Yeah,
even when terrible, like Lord of the Rings, where it's like, no, you really don't want to be there. But like on some level, you're like, I want to fight beside, right? Like,
yeah.
but like this is like, no, I don't want to be
No, I
there.
don't want
Like,
to
I
be
don't want to be
there.
in this world. It's terrible, but it's.
No, I think you're right, and it's visceral, but to me, it's a different. There's an intellectual viscerality. I've made up a
Sure.
word, and there's an emotional viscerality, and like intellectually, like I can't. I actually, how many films have I even seen about cults? Not many, probably.
I want you to watch oh shoot, I pulled it up. Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. I want you to watch that one.
And I should. And like, so it's like it's not like I have anything to compare this to, but it certainly is really intellectually visceral, but emotionally, I think that's maybe I'm
I'm
figuring
not
it out
sure
as we're
things can
talking about
be
it.
I'm not sure things can be intellectually visceral, but I get what you're trying to say.
Yes, it
Because
emotionally.
visceral means, according to the internet, relating to deep inward feelings rather than to the intellect. So,
Well,
like,
I'm in English is
I
a
think you're
living
trying to say like
language.
it sparked your thoughts, but
It really made me think,
yeah.
and
I think it gave
emotionally, it
me
wasn't.
more feels than you.
Yeah, if it had made more emotionally, if I had been more emotionally hit by this movie, I might have enjoyed it even. I mean, I really enjoyed this movie. I might have really gotten into it more, but as it is, it's more of a think piece than it is really like me feeling. And it's not that it completely lacked emotion or anything, but there's moments where the pigs are being anthropomorphized, and like she's caring for them, and I want to feel like something for that, but instead I'm like, well, it's interesting, and then later they turn
See,
on
I
her.
felt I felt things there, and when they got burned, and
It's like I felt
I think I
something,
felt
but
more than you.
yeah, you've got more. It got you more than me. But
Yeah,
again, that's where it's like it's hard. Again, it's hard to criticize this because it really is what it is, and it's like it's hard to
yeah,
imagine it being anything else.
yeah.
maybe technique wise, it could have held the camera still more in a few scenes, but like other than,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know.
So yeah, and it's interesting. We talk sometimes about what the audience for things are, which I hate a little bit too, though, because it's like just see things. Like if you
Yeah,
like
I
these
don't.
things, just
We
watch
don't need
different
to talk
things.
about the like. If you're gonna see the Wolf House, if you're the kind of person who finds the Wolf House, it's for you. This
Yeah.
isn't gonna just show up in people's feeds, right? Somebody, you
Oh,
have to know stuff.
I did quickly want to say that it did also make me think of this magnificent cake, because it's
Yeah,
also, which is way more straightforward but also dreamy. It's interesting how straightforward the magnificent cake feels now compared to, or this magnificent cake now feels to, compared to the Wolf House. But that film has a lot to do with Belgium colonizing and
yeah,
doing terrible things in the Congo, and it was also very dreamy and weird. But it was there, you didn't see, it wasn't postmodern, you didn't see it get made.
yeah.
And that would almost be an interesting double feature, is like,
That would be. Yeah, that would be really
kind of those
interesting.
two. Anyway, that was the
Anyways,
last thing I wanted to say.
yeah, this was a fascinating, unique watch.
Yes.